Commander Rachel Vasquez stared at the targeting display showing Haven's core structure. Her finger hovered over the firing authorization button while her crew watched in stunned silence. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone like the gravity of a dying star. "Commander, please don't do this," Dr. Lisa Shen whispered, her voice breaking. "There has to be another way." But Earth Command's final transmission was clear and brutal. "Harbinger, you have 30 seconds to comply. Or we'll assume you've been compromised. Destroy that habitat now." Rachel closed her eyes and pressed the button, the Harbinger's most powerful weapon, a planet-cracking missile designed for asteroid mining, streaked toward the alien habitat. The crew watched in horror as it struck Haven's central core, the very heart that had powered their beautiful civilization for over 1,000 years. The explosion was visible even from their distance. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the core, sending shockwaves through the massive ring structure. The bioluminescent gardens that had glowed like stars began to flicker and die. Sections of the habitat started breaking apart, spinning away into the darkness of space like the petals of a dying flower. Lieutenant Commander David Martinez fell to his knees. "We've killed them all," he whispered. Millions of innocent beings. The death of Haven wasn't quick. For hours, the crew watched as the ancient structure slowly tore itself apart. The Kethara-S final transmissions came through the communication systems, and Dr. Kevin Park's translation programs converted their last words into English. "The light grows dim. The garden sleeps. We forgive you, distant friends. Perhaps someday you will understand the songs we tried to sing." Those words hit the crew harder than any accusation or curse could have. Even in their final moments, the Kethara offered forgiveness to the beings who had destroyed everything they had built and loved. Dr. James Foster sat at his analysis station, staring at the data they had collected from the alien technology. His hands shook as he compiled report after report showing what humanity had just lost. The Kethara had possessed the cure for every disease known to humans. Their environmental restoration technology could have healed Earth's damaged climate within decades. Their energy systems could have provided clean power for 1,000 worlds. "We had the answer to everything," Foster said to no one in particular. Cancer, aging, pollution, energy crisis, space colonization, they were going to give us all of it. And we murdered them for it. The journey back to Earth took 18 months, the same amount of time it had taken to reach Proxima Centauri. But those 18 months felt like 18 years to the crew of the Harbinger. The ship became a floating prison of guilt and regret, where former friends could barely look at each other. Commander Rachel Vasquez locked herself in her quarters for days at a time, unable to face her crew. The sealed orders that had seemed so important before now felt like a joke. Earth Command had been so afraid of a species that could manipulate biological matter that they had ordered the destruction of the most peaceful civilization in the galaxy. The crew began to fracture along moral lines. Some, like Dr. Chun and Dr. Foster, openly questioned the mission and demanded that the truth be told when they returned to Earth. Others, frightened by the implications of disobeying military orders, insisted that they had done their duty to protect humanity. David Martinez found himself caught in the middle. He had fired the shot that killed the Kethara delegation, and the weight of that action was destroying him from the inside. During the long journey home, he began organizing secret meetings with crew members who wanted to expose the truth about what had really happened. "We can't let Earth believe this was a successful mission," he told a gathering of scientists and junior officers. "People need to know that we destroyed a peaceful civilization that wanted to help us." But Rachel still had loyal crew members who believed in following orders, no matter how painful those orders might be. Chief Engineer Tom Wilson argued that revealing the truth would only cause panic and regret. "What's done is done," he said during one heated discussion. "Telling Earth the truth won't bring the Kethara back. It will just tear our world apart with guilt and recrimination." The division among the crew grew deeper as they approached Earth. Some wanted to expose everything, while others wanted to maintain the official story that they had encountered a potentially hostile alien civilization and neutralized the threat. The Harbinger became a ship at war with itself when they finally arrived back at Earth's orbital station. The crew was greeted as heroes. The media called them the saviors of humanity, the brave explorers who had protected Earth from an alien threat. Parades were planned, medals were prepared, and history books were already being written about humanity's first successful contact with alien life, but the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. During the debriefing sessions, several crew members broke down and revealed what had really happened. Dr. Chun presented her analysis of Cathara technology, showing military officials the medical and environmental miracles that humanity had destroyed. Dr. Foster shared the complete cultural records that harmony singer Veltar had transmitted in their final moments. The revelation sent shockwaves through Earth's government and military establishment. General Webb and the other officials who had ordered the attack tried to justify their decision, claiming that they had acted to protect humanity from a superior alien threat. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Cathara had been completely peaceful, and their technology could have solved every major problem facing human civilization. The court-martial proceedings that followed were unlike anything in military history. Commander Rachel Vasquez and her senior officers faced charges ranging from genocide to crimes against humanity. The trials were broadcast around the world, exposing the full horror of what had been done in humanity's name. Rachel took the stand and testified about the impossible position she had been placed in. "I followed my orders," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I believed I was protecting Earth, but I was wrong. We were all wrong." The evidence presented during the trials painted a picture of a civilization that represented everything humanity claimed to value: peace, cooperation, scientific advancement, and environmental harmony. The Cathara had spent 1,000 years building a society based on growth and healing, only to be destroyed by a species that chose fear over hope. Public reaction was swift and devastating. Protests erupted in every major city on Earth as people demanded answers about how such a decision could have been made. The generation growing up during the trials became known as the Lost Generation, young people who would spend their entire lives knowing that their species had committed the ultimate act of cosmic evil. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the astronomer who had first discovered the Cathara habitat, emerged from her forced retirement to testify about the early decisions that had led to tragedy. Her voice shaking with emotion, she told the court about the moment when wonder had been replaced by fear, when humanity had chosen to send weapons instead of diplomats. "We could have been so much more," she said during her testimony. "The Cathara offered us a path to becoming the best version of ourselves. Instead, we chose to become the monsters we were afraid they might be." The trials lasted for 2 years, but the real judgment came from history itself. Humanity was forced to confront the darkest aspects of its nature, the fear, paranoia, and violence that had led to the destruction of their greatest potential allies. The Cathara became a symbol of everything humanity had lost through its own prejudice and aggression. In the end, the crew of the Harbinger received various sentences, but the real punishment was having to live with what they had done. Rachel Vasquez spent the rest of her life working with peace organizations, trying to ensure that humanity would never again choose fear over hope when facing the unknown. The story of the Cathara became required learning in schools around the world, a cautionary tale about the consequences of letting fear drive our decisions. Children grew up knowing that somewhere in the galaxy there had been beings who wanted to share the stars with humanity, and that those beings were gone forever because of choices made in boardrooms and military briefings far from the actual moment of contact. Humanity had reached for the stars and found paradise, only to destroy it with their own hands. The universe suddenly felt much lonelier and much darker, knowing what might have been. The meeting place was a nightmare that would haunt the dreams of any normal human. Station Omega floated in the heart of the Crimson Nebula, a massive structure built from the bones of an ancient alien ship. The corridors were lined with metal that pulsed like living tissue, and the air itself seemed to whisper with voices from long-dead civilizations. Dr. Kane adjusted his environmental suit for the third time in 10 minutes. As Earth's chief negotiator, He'd volunteered for this mission knowing it would be the most dangerous diplomatic meeting in human history. The 12 representatives from the Deathworlds weren't just warriors. They were living weapons forged by environments that would have wiped out humanity's ancestors in minutes. The conference chamber was a circular room with gravity, generators that could be adjusted for each delegate's homeworld conditions. Kane watched in fascination and horror as the representatives began to arrive. Commander Blake from Hellion Prime entered first, his acid-scarred armor hissing as it neutralized the station's atmosphere. His cybernetic eye swept the room, analyzing threats with mechanical precision. Behind him came Captain Stone from Graviton, each step creating small cracks in the reinforced floor. The man's exoskeleton was grafted so deeply into his bones that Kane couldn't tell where flesh ended and machine began. Tech Priest Vale materialized next, her consciousness flickering between 3 different android bodies as she tested the stations. Network security. The electromagnetic storms of Ironhold had forced her people to upload parts of their minds into quantum computers, and Vale existed as much in digital space as physical reality, but it was General Thorne from Razorwind who made Kane's blood run cold. The woman's lungs had been modified to process metal particles, and when she breathed, tiny sparks escaped her nostrils. Her armor was made from compressed atmospheric debris from her world, harder than diamond and sharp enough to cut through steel with a touch. Earth sends a scientist to negotiate with warriors, rumbled Captain Rex from Bloodstone. The man was 7 feet tall, his muscles enhanced by genetic modifications that allowed him to survive on a world where every animal was a predator. Scars covered his arms from battles with creatures that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Doctor Kane straightened his shoulders. I'm here because Earth recognizes that this threat requires more than normal solutions. We need people who understand impossible odds. A harsh laugh echoed from Colonel Zhang of Frostbite Station. Her pale skin showed the telltale signs of genetic modifications that allowed survival in sub-zero temperatures where even breath would freeze solid. Impossible odds? We live impossible odds every day. The question is, why should we care if your comfortable worlds burn? The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Kane had prepared for this moment, but facing 12 of the most dangerous humans alive was testing his resolve. These people had been born into conditions that would kill him instantly, shaped by environments that treated mercy as weakness. Because the Void Reaper doesn't care about our differences, Kane said quietly. It will consume your worlds just as easily as ours. We've analyzed its trajectory. After Earth falls, it will move to the outer rim. Hellion Prime, Bloodstone, all of your worlds will be nothing but energy to fuel its expansion. Major Cross from Stormworld stood up, electricity crackling across his modified skin. His world's constant electromagnetic storms had forced adaptations that turned humans into living generators. You have proof of this? Kane activated the holographic projector, showing the path of destruction the Void Reaper had carved across. 7 star systems. The images were horrifying. Planets that had existed for billions of years, wiped from reality as if they had never been. The silence in the room was deafening. 20 billion people, Kane said softly, gone in 3 weeks. Not killed, erased, and it's accelerating. Commander Volf from Shadowlands leaned forward, her enhanced eyes analyzing the data with predatory focus. Her world existed in perpetual darkness, and her people had evolved enhanced senses that could track prey across impossible distances. What do you propose we do about it? We combine our strengths, Kane replied. Earth has the scientific knowledge to understand their technology. Your worlds have developed innovations that our sheltered scientists never dreamed possible. Together, we might build something that can fight this enemy. The debate that followed was unlike anything in diplomatic history. Captain Rex challenged Commander Blake to single combat over a territorial dispute from 50 years ago. Tech Priest Vale's digital consciousness briefly took control of the station's systems to demonstrate Ironhold's technological superiority. General Thorne and Colonel Zhang nearly came to blows over resource allocation strategies. Kane watched in amazement as these representatives settled. their differences through methods that would horrify normal diplomats. Combat trials, technological demonstrations, and tests of endurance that would have killed ordinary humans. But slowly, he began to understand the logic behind their brutality. These people had been forged by worlds that showed no mercy. They spoke the language of strength because weakness meant death in their daily lives. When Commander Blake defeated Captain Rex in armed combat, Rex immediately pledged his world's support to the Alliance. When Tech Priest Vale's digital intrusion was countered by Major Cross's electromagnetic pulse, both began discussing how to merge their technologies. The turning point came when Captain Luna from Tidaloct brought out data from her world's observations. Her planet was locked between the light and dark sides of its star, creating temperature extremes that had split humanity into two subspecies. Her people had been watching the Void Reapers approach through telescopes that could peer across galactic distances. "It's not just moving toward Earth," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known a middle ground between burning heat and freezing cold. "The trajectory will take it through the outer spiral, consuming every human world we've established. This isn't about Earth versus the Deathworlds. This is about human survival." The holographic display showed the predicted path, and Kane felt his heart sink. The Zarian Dominion wasn't just targeting Earth's core worlds. They were planning to harvest every human settlement in the galaxy, turning 3 centuries of expansion into fuel for their cosmic empire. "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Frost from Iceguard, her breath creating small crystals in the air even through her environmental suit. 6 months before it reaches Earth," Kane replied. "Maybe 8 months before it starts systematically consuming the outer worlds?" The silence stretched for nearly a minute. These were people who had faced extinction daily and won, but the scale of this threat was beyond anything they had encountered. Finally, Commander Blake stood up. "My world has faced acid storms that could dissolve a battleship in seconds. We've survived because we adapted, we evolved, and we refused to surrender." He looked around the room at his fellow representatives. "If we're going to die, let's make sure we take this enemy with us." One by one, the other representatives stood. Captain Stone's exoskeleton servos whined as he rose to his full height. Graviton pledges its crushing technology and pressure-forged weapons. Tech Priest Vale's voice came from 3 android bodies simultaneously. Ironhold offers our quantum computing networks and biomechanical integration systems. The pledges continued around the room. Each world offered their unique horrors turned into advantages. Atmospheric processors that could create weapons from empty space. Genetic modifications that could turn humans into living spacecraft. Technologies that existed nowhere else because no other environment could have created them. The final ceremony was as brutal as everything else these people did. Each representative drew blood from their palm using weapons from their homeworlds. The ancient treaty stone at the center of the room had been carved from material that could withstand any environment, and as each drop of blood touched its surface, it glowed with an inner light. Dr. Kane was the last to participate, using a simple earth-made knife that looked primitive compared to the exotic weapons around him. But as his blood joined the others, he felt the weight of what they were creating. This wasn't just an alliance. It was a promise that humanity would face extinction with the fury of its most dangerous children. As the representatives began planning their return to their worlds, Kane realized that the most terrifying thing about this alliance wasn't what they were fighting against. It was what they were about to unleash. The Deathworlds were about to combine their technologies and their warriors into something the galaxy had never seen. The Zarian Dominion had no idea what was coming for them. The construction began immediately across 7 different worlds, each one more hostile than the last. What they were building had never been attempted before, a ship that could combine the deadliest technologies from humanity's most dangerous colonies. It was either going to save the human race or kill everyone involved in making it. On Hellion Prime, the work started in floating cities that drifted above oceans of acid. The atmosphere was so corrosive that it could eat through regular spaceship hulls in minutes, but Commander Viga's people had learned to use that deadly environment to their advantage. Deep in the planet's core, where the pressure and heat would crush any normal human, modified workers extracted metals that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Engineer Cross led the metallurgy team, his body covered in scars from acid burns that would have killed anyone else. His lungs had been replaced with mechanical filters that could process the toxic atmosphere, and his hands were covered in a biometallic coating that made them nearly indestructible. He watched as massive furnaces, powered by the planet's volcanic activity, forged armor plating from materials that defied every law of physics Earth scientists knew. This metal doesn't just resist energy weapons, Cross explained to the Earth observers through their protective suits. It absorbs the energy and redirects it. Your enemy's weapons will actually make our ship stronger. The Earth scientists couldn't believe what they were seeing. The armor plates coming out of those furnaces were somehow alive, growing and adapting to damage like living tissue. When they tested laser weapons against the samples, the metal didn't just deflect the beams, it learned from them, becoming immune to that exact frequency of energy. Meanwhile, on Bloodstone, the shipyards looked like something from a horror movie. The planet had turned every living creature into a weapon, and humans there had been forced to become even deadlier just to survive. Captain Titan's engineering teams were working with biomechanical systems that most humans couldn't even look at without feeling sick. Dr. Rage, the lead bioengineer, had been so heavily modified that she was barely recognizable as human. Her nervous system had been enhanced with genetic material from the planet's apex predators, giving her reflexes that could track targets moving at impossible speeds. She was designing targeting systems that didn't just calculate where enemies would be. They hunted them with the instinct of a creature that had never known anything but killing. Traditional computers think in steps, she explained to the visiting Earth technicians. Our biomechanical systems think like predators. They don't predict where the enemy will move. They feel it. They taste fear in the electromagnetic signatures. They smell weakness in engine emissions. The targeting arrays being built on Bloodstone were growing rather than being assembled. Massive organic computers that pulsed with their own heartbeat, fed by nutrients that came from the planet's deadliest creatures. When the Earth observers watched test runs, they saw something that chilled their blood. The biomechanical systems didn't just lock onto targets, they seemed to hate them. But the real breakthrough was happening on Ironhold, where tech specialist Nova's teams were pushing the boundaries between human consciousness and machine intelligence. The electromagnetic storms that constantly raged across the planet had forced the inhabitants to become something new, part human, part computer, existing in both physical and digital space simultaneously. The quantum processing centers were built deep underground, shielded from the planet's chaotic electromagnetic field by layers of specially designed metal. But instead of traditional computers, they were using human brains that had been enhanced with quantum processors. Engineers who had volunteered for the project had parts of their consciousness uploaded into the ship's systems, becoming living components of the vessel. We're not just building a ship, Nova explained, her consciousness flickering between 7 different android bodies. We're creating a living entity that can think faster than any computer and feel emotions like any human. It will understand the battle not just tactically, but emotionally. It will want to win. The most disturbing part was watching the volunteers undergo the integration process. Brilliant engineers and warriors having quantum circuits grafted directly into their brains, their consciousness expanding into digital space while their bodies were modified to interface with the ship's systems. Some of them would never be fully human again, but they were becoming something that could process battle data at the speed of thought. Back on Earth, Dr. Rivers and his team were working around the clock in secret laboratories buried beneath the Antarctic ice. They had recovered fragments from ships that had been partially consumed by the Void Reaper, and what they found was terrifying. The Zarian technology wasn't just advanced, it was based on principles that shouldn't have been possible. They found a way to manipulate quantum fields at the subatomic level, Dr. Petrov explained to the emergency council. They're not destroying matter, they're convincing it to stop existing. The atoms just forget how to hold together. The breakthrough came when they realized that the Zarian technology had a weakness. It relied on quantum entanglement between the weapon and its target. If they could create a quantum virus, a digital infection that could spread through those entangled particles, they might be able to turn the enemy's weapon against itself, working with data streams from Ironhold's quantum computers, Earth's. Scientists began developing something that had never existed before. A virus that existed in quantum space, capable of traveling through the quantum entanglement fields that the Void Reaper used to erase matter. It was like creating a disease that could infect the laws of physics themselves. On Graviton, Captain, Hunter's people were building weapons that could only be forged under crushing pressure. The planet's gravity was so intense that it would flatten any normal human in seconds, but the inhabitants had adapted with exoskeletons grafted directly onto their bones. Their workshops existed in conditions that would compress diamonds into dust. The weapons they were creating defied comprehension. Projectiles that were compressed so tightly they existed in a different state of matter. When fired, they would decompress explosively on impact, releasing energy equivalent to small nuclear bombs. But the most impressive were the gravity weapons. Devices that could create localized gravity fields, strong enough to crush enemy ships from the inside out. Hunter himself oversaw the testing, his reinforced skeleton creaking under the planet's immense gravity even with his mechanical supports. These weapons don't just hit the target, he explained through his mechanical breathing apparatus. They reach inside the target and crush it from within. No armor can stop gravity. The construction project was consuming resources on a scale that had never been attempted. Entire asteroid belts were being strip mined for rare materials. The energy output of multiple stars was being harvested through massive collection arrays. Every human world was contributing something to the project, even those that had remained neutral in previous conflicts. But the most impressive sight was on Stormworld, where Major Bolt's teams were building the ship's power systems. The planet's constant electrical storms provided unlimited energy, but harnessing it required humans who had been turned into living conductors. The workers moved through electrical fields that would instantly kill anyone else. Their modified bodies channeling power that could light up entire cities. The power cores being built there weren't just batteries, they were controlled lightning. Storms contained within electromagnetic fields. The energy output was so massive that it created its own gravitational effects. When the cores were tested, they generated power levels that registered on sensors from other star systems. As the months passed, reports started coming in from the construction sites. The ship they were building wasn't following any traditional design. It was organic in some places, mechanical in others, and purely digital in still others. Parts of it existed in normal space, while other sections existed only in quantum fields. The vessel that was taking shape defied every convention of shipbuilding. It had armor that could learn and adapt, weapons that hunted with predatory instinct, and a consciousness that spanned both human emotion and machine logic. Most disturbing of all, it seemed to be aware of its own construction, sometimes making modifications to its own design without human input. Dr. Rivers received reports that chilled him to the bone. The ship was becoming something that had never existed before, a fusion of the deadliest technologies from humanity's most dangerous worlds, guided by a consciousness that was part human, part machine, and entirely focused on one goal: stopping the Void Reaper at any cost. When the construction was finally complete, they had created something that looked like humanity's nightmares given physical form. The ship they called Death's Herald was black as space itself, covered in armor that seemed to move like living skin. Its weapon systems pulsed with their own heartbeat, and its quantum processors hummed with a sound that was almost like singing. But as terrifying as it looked, everyone involved knew one simple truth. This monster they had built was the only thing standing between humanity and complete extinction. The intelligence reports that arrived on Earth were worse than anyone had imagined. The Void Reaper had finished consuming the outer star systems and was now moving directly toward humanity's core worlds. Space itself seemed to bend around the massive ship as it approached, creating gravitational waves that could be detected from impossible distances. Captain Torres stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching the holographic displays with growing dread. The enemy vessel was enormous beyond comprehension, easily 100 times larger than the biggest ship humanity had ever built. But size wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was what it left behind. Absolutely nothing. "Sir, we're getting the final transmission from the Kepler Defense Station," Lieutenant Hayes announced, her voice barely steady. The communication crackled through the speakers, filled with static and terror. "This is Admiral Brooks at Kepler Station. The Void Reaper it's impossible to describe. It's not just a ship, it's like a moving piece of space that devours everything it touches. Our entire defensive fleet just stopped existing. Number. Explosions, no wreckage, nothing. They're just gone." The transmission cut to silence, and Torres knew that another star system had been wiped from the galaxy. According to their calculations, Earth had maybe 3 weeks before the Void Reaper arrived in the Sol system. In the hidden construction facility beyond Pluto's orbit, Death's Herald was finally ready for launch. The ship that emerged from the construction docks looked like something that had crawled out of humanity's darkest nightmares. Its hull was black as empty space, covered in armor that seemed to ripple and move like living tissue. Weapon systems jutted from its surface like the spines of some cosmic predator. Commander Quinn stood on the bridge, feeling the ship's consciousness pressing against her mind. She had volunteered to lead this mission knowing it was almost certainly a suicide run, but being connected to the ship's biomechanical systems was more disturbing than she had expected. Parts of her thoughts were now shared with the ship's quantum processors, and she could feel its hunger for battle. "Captain, the crew is reporting some unusual sensations," reported Chief Engineer Volt, his body crackling with small electrical discharges from his Stormworld modifications. "The ship's consciousness seems to be excited." Quinn nodded grimly. The crew of Death's Herald was unlike any that had ever served together. Warriors from Bloodstone with reflexes enhanced by genetic modifications. Engineers from Ironhold whose consciousness existed partially in digital space. Weapons specialists from Graviton whose bones had been reinforced to survive crushing pressure. And soldiers from a dozen other Deathworlds, each bringing their own terrifying adaptations. The plan was both simple and insane. They would approach the Void Reaper using stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured Zarian fragments, get close enough to deploy Dr. River's quantum virus, then try to survive long enough for the weapon to work. The virus was designed to spread through the quantum entanglement fields that the enemy used to erase matter, turning their own technology against them. But first, they had to get close to a ship that could delete them from existence with a single shot. The approach to the Void Reaper took 18 hours of the most nerve-wracking flight in human history. Death's Herald moved through space like a hunting predator, its biomechanical systems tracking the enemy vessel while its quantum processors calculated attack patterns that changed by the second. "Contact in 30 minutes, announced Navigator. Luna, her enhanced eyes glowing as she interfaced directly with the ship's sensors. "The enemy is dutiful and terrible. I can see why they call it the Void Reaper." On the main display, the Void Reaper appeared as a massive structure that seemed to bend light around itself. Its surface was covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, and strange energies danced along its hull like captured lightning. Most disturbing of all, space around the ship seemed to be folding inward, creating distortions that made navigation almost impossible. "Weapons are detecting us," reported Gunner Blaze from Hellion Prime, her acid-scarred hands moving across controls that were grown rather than built. "They're charging some kind of, I don't know what to call. It's not energy, it's not matter. It's like they're preparing to delete a section of space." Quinn felt the ship's consciousness surge with anticipation. Death's Herald wanted to fight. Every system in the vessel had been designed for war, and now it was finally facing an enemy worthy of its capabilities. All hands prepare for combat. Quinn announced through the ship's biomechanical communication system. Remember, we only need to survive long enough to deploy the virus. After that. She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone aboard knew this was likely a one-way trip. The battle began when the Void Reaper fired its first dissolution beam. The weapon didn't travel through space like normal energy, it simply made a section of reality stop existing. Deaths. Harold twisted away from the attack, its organic armor rippling as the ship moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Direct hit on our port armor, Chief Engineer Volt reported, his voice tight with concentration. But the armor is learning, it's adapting to the frequency of their weapon. The armor plating that had been hit was glowing with an eerie light. The metal somehow remembering the attack and preparing defenses against similar strikes. It was like watching the ship evolve in real time, becoming more dangerous with every second of combat. Death's Herald returned fire with weapons that had never been tested in actual battle. Gravity bombs from Graviton that created localized crushing fields around impact points. Biomechanical missiles from Bloodstone that hunted their targets with predatory intelligence. Quantum disruptors from Ironhold that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The attacks hit the Void Reaper's hull and did nothing. The enemy ship's defenses simply absorbed the energy, converting it into power for their own systems. Their shields are adaptive too, Gunner Blaze reported. Every weapon we fire just makes them stronger. Quinn felt Death's Herald's consciousness surge with what could only be described as rage. The ship had been built from the combined fury of humanity's most dangerous worlds, and it was not going to be defeated easily. Switching to ramming speed, Quinn announced. If we can't hurt them from a distance, we'll get close enough to deploy the virus manually. What followed was the most intense 15 minutes of combat in human history. Death's Herald dove toward the Void Reaper like a living missile, weaving between dissolution beams that would have erased any other ship instantly. The biomechanical targeting systems tracked multiple threats simultaneously while the quantum processors calculated impossible evasion patterns. Sections of the ship simply vanished as enemy weapons found their mark. The crew compartment where the Graviton Marines had been stationed just stopped existing, taking 12 brave warriors with it. The port weapons array disappeared in a flash of non-light that left no trace it had ever been there. But Death's Herald kept coming. The ship's consciousness was focused on a single goal: get close enough to deploy the quantum virus. Every system that survived was dedicated to that purpose. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, reported damage control. We've lost life support in the starboard quarter. Rerouting consciousness through backup neural networks, announced tech specialist Nova, her android body sparking as she interfaced with damaged systems. The ship is angry, really angry. Quinn could feel it too. Death's Herald wasn't just taking damage, it was taking it personally. The ship had developed something that could only be called hatred for the Void Reaper. Finally, they were close enough. Quinn activated the quantum virus deployment system, launching a series of microscopic probes that burrowed into the enemy ship's quantum field generators. Each probe carried a copy of the virus that Dr. Rivers' team had developed, a digital plague designed to turn the Void Reaper's own technology against itself. Virus deployed, Quinn announced. Now we wait and see if it works. For agonizing minutes, nothing happened. The Void Reaper continued its assault, and Death's Herald continued taking devastating damage. The crew was down to less than half their original numbers, and major systems were failing throughout the ship. Then something beautiful and terrible began to happen. The Void Reaper's hull started to flicker, sections of the massive ship appearing and disappearing as its own dissolution. Technology turned inward. The geometric patterns on its surface began to collapse into themselves, creating cascade failures that spread throughout the vessel. "It's working," whispered Navigator Luna. "The virus is spreading through their quantum network. They're dissolving themselves." The enemy ship, which had seemed invincible moments before, began to collapse. Its own weapons, designed to erase matter from existence, were now targeting the ship that housed them. Reality folded inward as the Void Reaper consumed itself in a brilliant display of self-destruction. Death's Herald, barely functional and held together by the sheer will of its biomechanical consciousness, managed to escape the gravitational collapse that followed. As they limped away from the expanding singularity that had once been the Void Reaper, Quinn felt something she hadn't expected to feel again: hope. The battle for humanity's survival wasn't over yet. As Death's Herald limped away from the collapsing singularity that had once been the Void Reaper, alarms started screaming throughout the damaged ship. Commander Quinn felt the vessel's biomechanical consciousness flooding her mind with panic and confusion. "Captain, we have a problem," Chief Engineer Volt announced, his electrical modifications sparking wildly as he interfaced with the ship's damaged systems. The quantum virus didn't just destroy the Void Reaper. It's spreading through their entire fleet network. On the main display, a terrifying sight unfolded. Dozens of smaller Zarian vessels that had been hidden throughout the solar system were beginning to flicker and dissolve as the virus spread through their quantum communication networks. But instead of simply vanishing, they were fighting back, trying to purge the infection from their systems. "They're adapting faster than we expected," reported tech specialist Nova, her consciousness scattered across multiple damaged android bodies. "Some of the ships are cutting their quantum connections to avoid infection, but others are using the virus as a template to create their own counter-virus." Quinn felt a chill run down her spine. They had wounded the enemy fleet, but they hadn't destroyed it completely. And now the Zarian Dominion knew exactly what kind of weapon humanity possessed. Navigator Luna, her enhanced eyes glowing with strain, suddenly screamed, "New contacts!" Massive energy signatures dropping out of hyperspace around Earth. The display shifted to show Earth's solar system, and what Quinn saw made her blood freeze. Hundreds of Zarian ships were materializing around humanity's homeworld, their hulls glowing with the same reality-bending energy that had made the Void Reaper so terrifying. They had called for reinforcements. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." From Earth Defense Command, Lieutenant Hayes announced, her voice shaking. "Admiral Brooks is requesting immediate assistance. The Zarian fleet they're preparing to erase Earth entirely." Quinn looked around the bridge at her surviving crew. Half the ship was gone, most of their weapons were offline, and the biomechanical consciousness that held Death's Herald together was barely functioning. But they were the only thing standing between Earth and complete annihilation. "Set course for Earth," Quinn ordered. "Maximum speed." "Captain, the ship can barely hold together as it is," Volt protested. "If we push the engines now, we might break apart before we even reach the battle." Quinn felt Death's Herald's consciousness pressing against her mind, and she understood what the ship was trying to tell her. It wasn't afraid of dying, it was afraid of failing. "The ship wants to fight," Quinn said quietly. "And so do we." Set course for Earth. The journey back to humanity's homeworld took 12 hours, and every minute was agony. Death's Herald was held together by little more than willpower and the determination of its biomechanical systems. Sections of the ship that had been damaged beyond repair were sealed off, their crew lost to the vacuum of space. But as they approached Earth, something incredible happened. Other ships began joining them. Vessels from every human colony even. Those that had never participated in interstellar conflicts before. Cargo ships fitted with improvised weapons, mining vessels converted into rams, even luxury cruise liners that had been hastily armored and armed. "Captain, we're getting hails from over 300 ships," Hayes reported, her voice filled with amazement. "They're all requesting permission to join our attack formation." Quinn stared at the tactical display showing the ragtag fleet that was assembling around Death's Herald. These weren't military vessels. They were farmers and miners, traders and teachers, people who had never fired a shot in anger but were willing to die to protect their homeworld. "Open a channel to all ships," Quinn ordered. "This is Commander Quinn of Death's Herald to all vessels. I won't lie to you. most of us probably won't survive this battle. The enemy has weapons that can erase us from existence, and we're going up against odds that no sane person would accept." She paused, feeling the weight of 3 centuries of human expansion and hope pressing down on her shoulders. "But we're not going quietly. We're not going to let them take our home, our families, our future without a fight. Earth gave birth to all of us, and now it's time to return the favor." The response was immediate. 300 voices speaking, in dozens of different languages and accents from across human space, all saying the same thing: "We're with you." The battle began at the edge of Earth's atmosphere. The Zarian fleet had arranged itself in a perfect geometric pattern around the planet, their ships glowing with the energy needed to erase an entire world from existence. But they hadn't expected to face humanity's entire remaining fleet. Led by a ship that had already proven it could kill their most powerful vessel, Death's Herald led the charge, its damaged hull streaming atmosphere and debris, but its weapons still functioning. The biomechanical targeting systems locked onto enemy vessels with predatory hunger, while the quantum processors calculated attack patterns that defied conventional military strategy. "All ships engage at will," Quinn broadcast. "Target their quantum field generators. Don't let them complete the erasure sequence." What followed was the most desperate battle in human history. Civilian ships rammed into Zarian vessels, their crews knowing they were sacrificing their lives for seconds of delay. Mining ships used their industrial equipment to tear holes in enemy hulls. Even the luxury liners fought with a fury that surprised everyone. Their passengers turned into gunners and damage control crews. The Zarian ships fought back with weapons that deleted matter from existence, but they were facing an enemy that refused to be erased. Every time a human ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. Every time a section of the fleet was wiped out, the survivors regrouped and attacked even more fiercely. Death's Herald was at the center of it all, its biomechanical consciousness, coordinating the entire battle through quantum communication links with every human ship. The vessel had become more than just a warship. It was the beating heart of humanity's last stand. "Direct hit on the primary quantum generator," reported Gunner Blaze, her acid-scarred hands flying over controls that were more grown than built. "But they're adapting again. They're using multiple smaller generators instead of one large one." The battle raged for 6 hours, and slowly the tide began to turn. The human fleet was taking terrible losses, but they were also learning. Every attack, every defensive maneuver, every desperate sacrifice was teaching them how to fight an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The breakthrough came when Navigator Luna, her consciousness partially merged with Death's Herald's quantum processors, discovered something incredible about the Zarian technology. "Captain, I've found their weakness," she announced, her voice distorted by the neural interface. "Their quantum erasure weapons require perfect coordination between all their ships. If we can disrupt that coordination, the entire fleet becomes vulnerable," Quinn finished. "Can we do it?" "Not with our current weapons," Luna replied. "But if we can get close enough to their command ship, I can upload a modified version of our quantum virus directly into their network." Quinn looked at the tactical display. The Zarian command ship was at the center of their formation, protected by dozens of smaller vessels. Getting close enough to upload the virus would mean flying directly into the heart of their defensive grid. "It's a suicide run," Chief Engineer Volt stated flatly. "Everything we've done has been a suicide run," Quinn replied. "But we're still here." Death's Herald began its final approach, diving toward the enemy formation like a wounded predator making one last attack. The ship's biomechanical systems were failing throughout the vessel, but its consciousness was focused entirely on reaching the command ship. Enemy fire erupted around them as they penetrated the defensive grid. Sections of Death's Herald simply vanished as dissolution beams found their mark, but the ship kept coming. The organic armor adapted to each attack, learning and evolving even as it was being destroyed. "Hull breach in the main reactor compartment," Volt reported. "We're losing power throughout the ship." "Rerouting through backup biological systems," Nova announced, her consciousness flickering between her remaining android bodies. The ship is running on pure determination now. They were close enough now. Quinn could see the geometric patterns on the command ship's hull, the same reality-bending designs that had made the Void Reaper so terrifying. But this time, they had a weapon that could turn that technology against itself. Uploading virus. Now, Luna announced, her enhanced neural interface glowing as she established a direct connection with the enemy ship's quantum network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Zarian command ship began to flicker, its hull rippling as the virus spread through its systems. But instead of simply dissolving like the Void Reaper had done, the command ship fought back, trying to contain the infection. "It's not working," Luna gasped, blood trickling from her nose as the neural strain increased. "They've learned from what happened to the Void Reaper. They're containing the virus." Quinn felt Death's Herald's consciousness surge with what could only be described as rage. The ship had come too far, sacrificed too much, to fail,